I've got my two sawhorses set up here. They're kind of like mini workbenches. I've got my dog holes in them and my grooves for the micro jigs. So these are all pretty much set to go. And now I want to build a little platform that'll sit between these two and act as sort of the continuation of the two of them to make one big open workbench, kind of a MFT table, if you will. I'm hoping to get these two sawhorse hole patterns to match the interior pattern that I'm building on this 10 by 10 hole module that will sit in between here. This module is going to be fairly shallow so that I can move it easily. It'll be kind of a mobile platform. So we'll get started cutting up some MDF and building a frame underneath that to give it some stability and building a mobile MFT station. Welcome back to Outbuilding. I'm Steve, and this is part of the workshop playlist. So I've got my plans here, both for the sawhorses that I've already built, and then this is for this little mobile deck that's going to be basically square. It's going to be a good test of the way to join these different modules together and maintain a grid pattern across those holes. So I've got some ideas. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. But first I need to build the frame. That's going to be made out of 18mm Baltic birch, which I'm just ripping up to size here. It's going to sit down inside the shell of MDF. With those all cut to dimension, then I used my miter and cross-cut those, taking care to get the dimensions just right, cleaned them up a little bit with sandpaper, and then sort of laid out the frame to see what I was looking at in terms of stack-up errors from all those different pieces. All right, so I got all my pieces cut out for the frame, and because I want to make sure the dimensions are super accurate so that I can keep that grid pattern in place, I need to make sure that my stack-up, or like when I put all my pieces together in this frame on the one dimension here, that they're not getting too far adrift from the overall dimension I need. So I just kind of mocked this up, and I can put a tape across and see what my inner dimension is. And I'm just like less than a 32nd off in that direction, and about the same on this. The difference between the two is about less than a 32nd. And that's not very much, but I'm trying to keep these really super accurate. And if anything, I just need to make sure that the thickness of my two MDF sides and this dimension doesn't go over that 96 increment of the hole size, because I can accommodate things if they're slightly smaller. If they get bigger, it's really hard to make that grid pattern fit. Okay, so I've got these interior frame pieces, and I want to be able to hang a drawer stack down below this thing. And so I'm going to use the sort of Parf system here to just put some holes in there, and then I can use dogs as joiners to hang that, to make sort of mount points for the drawer stack. So I've got a piece of MDF here that I cut out because I know that's how big my shell will be, so I can use that kind of as an offset reference. And then I can use these jigs that I showed you in one of the previous episodes that I made for this system, and I can use those to locate my first hole really accurately without having to measure in this frame piece and get it spaced off, accounting for that MDF. And I can't drill all the way through because I'll go through the bench, so I can just spot drill it to get started and then finish that here. And then I'll set my ruler on with a pin. And I'll use my jig again to locate the far side. All right, so with those holes pretty well, really accurately located, I can use them to pin down this jig and drill my mounting holes for the drawers. All right, so now with those frames put out, I'll put the holes in them and everything, I can go ahead and lay out the where the cross pieces are going to hook up to the frames. I can just measure those and gang them together because it's going to be the same on both sides, or on all three of them. With all my frame pieces set up, I'm going to go ahead and drill. I'm going to use this pocket jig and drill some pocket holes in the frame pieces, and then screw it all together, glue it and screw it together. And I'll have the vacuum on while I'm doing it, so you won't be able to hear the video on the video. So I'll switch to time lapse and put this together. All right, well, there's a little public service announcement here. I bought this online, this pocket jig from Enjoy Wood, and it was well regarded, written up by Hooked on Wood, a bunch of other people that had really good reviews of it. And I will say that the whole device, the mechanism, the fit of it and finish of it and everything is really good. The drill bit they give you is awful. It's just, I used it, I tried to cut the first 2 holes with it just now, and what I see is that there's a nice point, a nice drill shape, and then the second step is just, it's a flat. It's literally, and all it did was burnish the wood that I was going into, and it didn't do anything to cut it. However, I went and got, for not too much money, just a Craig bit, which is brilliant, and it cuts really well. So if you get one of these, just be advised that it's gonna, 2 things are gonna happen. This bit's gonna be really, probably not very useful, at least for the plywood that I'm using. I'm using Baltic birch here. And then also these little shims or bushings tend to slide out. That I don't find such a big deal, and I think I can try to fix them in there. But anyway, the rest of this thing works really well, so I'll go back and start drilling these things out. But it's good to know. So with the new bit and then second pass at these, the holes went through really easily, and I was able to get all the end piece holes that hold the frame together done. I also did some holes in the sides of these frame pieces so that I could secure the top from below with using the same pocket screws. All right, so I've got with all the holes drilled so that I can secure the top to the frame when I'm done from below. I can go ahead and glue these up and screw them together. So I'm using the tabletop of the table saw right now just because I feel like it's probably the squarest and flattest thing I've got. All right, with everything sort of squared up and true and flat, I can go ahead and screw the frame together with it glued, and then I'll switch to the other side and do the other side. All right, so I got a nice stiff frame. I've used the tabletop of the saw here, which is pretty flat, to get that flat, which will hopefully translate to the MDF top being flat. And then checking for square across this, since it's going to kind of push on the MDF when the MDF's being put in place. It's nice and square. The one blunder, this is the first time I've ever used pocket screws, and I actually like them quite a bit once I got that bit figured out. The one issue I found is that I had one of these boards flipped, so this is upside down, and I want to be able to screw down into the tabletop and or the bench top, and this one piece is flipped, but I can remedy that by just putting another couple of set of holes in. So I got away with that one on this build, but I will be more mindful of that in the future. So I'm going to put those holes in there and then move on to the MDF and build the shell that this is going to sit down inside of. When I'm building these workbenches bigger, this frame might have legs, it may have drawer stacks and other things in it, but the same principle is going to apply. There'll be a plywood frame put together somewhat like this, and then that will support a shell of the workbench top, kind of like the sawhorses here, although the sawhorses slide up and down and have sort of an apron on the side, a little bit different. So with the frame done and set aside, I went ahead and got the MDF cut down to just sort of rough dimensions. It's all going to have bevel cuts on it, which I want to go back and do very accurately. But to start with, I just kind of got things roughed out into the side pieces I need. All right, well, this is a little widget I'll show you I made. It's just a piece of rope, a piece of PVC pipe up on top, an old scrap of plywood, and then I've got an aluminum C-channel that I countersunk some screws through and bolted in there. And I just have a hard time personally moving sheets of MDF around. And so I can hook this under, as long as I've got the MDF blocked up on something like 2x4s, I can get underneath there and better lift a sheet of MDF on my own. It's hard for me to do in the shop by myself. And MDF is by far the heaviest of the things that I lift. So I'm going to see if I can use my widget to hoist it up here. Not pretty, but it worked. So cutting down these big sheet goods is actually kind of the motivation for this whole island in the first place, and I don't have that island yet. I did in one of the previous videos, I showed doing my first couple cuts with the track saw, and it's really important to have a big flat area to work, and this is adequate, but it will be much easier with the island as I get it built. But I'm going to just put a piece of cardboard underneath that will accept the curve of the saw so I don't cut through the table saw below. And I'm just going to rough this piece in and then finish it up on the table saw for this particular piece. But I'm trying to be thoughtful as I do this about how I'm using the track saw, because that's what's going to actually be the benefit for the island when I'm done. So I'm kind of thinking through the process as I do all these things and making sure that what I'm building will accommodate this and do it much easier. For instance, if I had Parf holes along the end here, I could square this piece up and square my fence up really easily, just make measurements and make cuts and break down the sheet. That's where I want to get, because I want to do a bunch of cabinets that will require that. So the dust extraction makes a racket when I use this track saw, so I'll just speed through this and show you. The track saw is really, really nice. I look forward to using it more on the workbench when I get a bigger work surface, but for now, it's super handy to get that first cut done on a large sheet that's really unwieldy otherwise. So for these next cuts on the top, I want to make beveled edges, and bevel cuts need a really clean outfeed, because if the piece starts to twist as it comes out of this table saw and you're doing a bevel cut, you're gonna mess up the bevel cut. So that's where these adjustable sawhorses can be kind of useful. This rolling tabletop, actually, it's been a great bench, but it moves around. Like if I roll it around the room, based on the floor and the concrete and wherever else underneath it, it moves around, and it doesn't always end up being perfectly level. So that's why I want to build a steady island. But for now, I can adjust these sawhorses up and get the outfeed just right so that I won't mess up my bevel cut. And just to be clear, I'm not using this as a level. I'm using it more as a straight edge, just to make sure that I've got a clean and consistent outfeed. So with the pieces all roughed out, I was able to go back through and set up the bevel cut for 45 degrees and make really kind of careful and precise cuts, both first to the tabletop to create a square tabletop, and then to all the side pieces at the right length to match up with that square top. And this is where those sawhorses being leveled made a huge difference. It was really nice to have those and just be able to feed right off onto those. I haven't been able to do that as easily without outfeed before. So already the sawhorses are making a big impact on just being able to make accurate cuts. All right, so I've got my piece of MDF cut out, and I've got my sides. It's all miter joints, and I want to make those as tight as I can just because they're going to show as exposed edges. And so I'm going to try something that I saw online. I'm going to give Dennis from Hooked on Wood credit for this, so thank you, Dennis. I don't know if it was his idea, but I've seen he taped up the edges of a miter joint and then used that to kind of ensure that they were lined up properly, because the MDF bows a little bit. Okay, so with that kind of preloaded like that, I can go around and get my glue applied all the way around and prepare to put these together and be a little less concerned about positioning things, which is nice. with all that dried up, we can see how well the measurements ended up. See if I got it all right. All right, well, looking this over, learning a lot. The seams on three sides look really good. The seams along the front edge are almost completely closed. So along that dimension, I'm almost exactly at that 96 millimeter increment. I think I'm within a 32nd or even slightly less, a little bit bigger than that. Unfortunately, on this side, I'm over by about a 16th or a little bit more, and even slightly more on this side. So unfortunately, that side over there kind of blew out and didn't work as well. And I'm glad this is inexpensive MDF. I probably will just cut this down and reuse the main panel here and rebuild this, because I've got I think a better way to get this dimensionally accurate. And I know those aren't very big dimension differences, but the whole key is that this has to be under that 96 millimeter increment, or if it isn't, then it's going to push my grid holes out, and there's no way to remedy that. It's okay to have a little tiny bit of space between my modules to maintain the grid pattern, but I can't have them overlapping. And so unfortunately, this is a good learning lesson for me, a good way to practice some of these techniques. But and thankfully, like I said, this is pretty inexpensive MDF. I think the whole sheet was $40 or $50, and so this is half a sheet. So a $25 mistake, but I learned a lot doing it, and I can salvage most of the wood or the material inside here. I've got a different way, so I'm going to go get everything cut again. I won't show you that, and then I'm going to assemble it a different way and see if I can't do a better job. Well, it took me a little while to cut out another set of MDF, but I actually feel good about it. I got them really accurately cut. I'm going to try it this way. I've got the frame in here to kind of create just a brace, and I'm not going to glue it to the frame yet. I'm just going to glue the four corners, get those really stable and everything. And then I can shim things up and get it really flat and drop the lid down in there, and I can put some weight on it. It's just going to squish itself out. I've got this, again, really much more accurately cut. I trimmed up the frame just with a couple little tiny cuts to get it completely square and get it exactly the right dimensions. So I feel pretty good about this. I'm going to just glue these corners. I won't show you that because it's kind of going to be a bunch of juggling with the straps, but I'll get that glued up, let that dry for a bit, and then I'll come back and I'll show you, and I'll get the top of the shell put together. So these are dried out, and I will go ahead and see if I can try plan B and see if that works better. I think by kind of not trying to manage 5 glue joints or whatever that is, a whole bunch of glue joints at once, this will be a little bit easier, because these 4 all worked really well, and I can focus on the other remaining ones for the lid now. Okay, so the plan is I got the top cut out here. We'll build it upside down and put the frame on as a sort of a brace to hold it together, kind of like I did when I glued it up. So it really did make it easier having had the corners already glued up and completely true. Then I could just focus on gluing up this lower cap or the top all the way around and get it put in position and really accurately placed. All right, well, these got left overnight and fully dried the glue, so pop these apart and see what it looks like this time. Round 2. Edges look really nice all the way around, which is awesome. And for dimensions, perfect. And really, really good. Awesome. I'm super pleased. None of it's oversized, and it's as close to a 32nd of an inch. I'm using 30 seconds because I don't have a metric ruler, but it'd be about a millimeter So I've got it just a tiny bit undersized. So now I can go ahead and cut holes in this. It feels super solid. And I'll screw down the frame underneath and tighten it in there. But this is good. It looks good. I'm going to start cutting some holes. With the holes pre-drilled in the top, it was pretty easy to pocket screw down the frame to the shell. Okay, so I got this set up, and actually seeing this next to the sawhorses gives me an idea, which I'll get to later. But if you remember, I've got these jigs that keep everything lined up exactly from the edge to get a 48 millimeter hole from both the corner and from the top. And that's great. Right now I've got this top that is almost exactly a 1/16 of an inch shorter than a 96 millimeter increment, which is kind of what I want. I want it a little bit short. And I found some shim stock that's 32nd, so I can split it in half. And I can actually kind of leave half of the space on this side and half on the space on the other side when I set up my jig. So I'm going to use this little shim stock to offset the holes and kind of get it centered. I'm also going to just make a dot here on this corner with my Sharpie. That's going to get cut off when I round these edges over. But I'll make sure that I reference everything from this side going out so that when we put these modules next to one another, all the holes line up. And then I learned from the sawhorses, when I rounded these over before and then used my jig, it was a little bit harder to get things to register because of the round over. So I'm going to round this over after I've cut my holes. To start the holes, I used the jig and set up the sides, walked down each of the sides and set up the single row of holes that goes down all the way around the perimeter of the mobile base. These holes are primarily going to be used for either things on the edge with dogs or to join modules together. And then finally I walked around and chamfered all the holes just to clean them up. With the sides done, I went to the top and I used the UJK jig and triangles to go ahead and lay out the small 3 millimeter holes. With the whole array of holes in place, I went ahead and used my jig on the very far corner from where I started, and I went ahead and just set it up with the same spacing that I used to put the top pattern down, and I used a pencil and just drew a circle around the hole. I wanted to see how close I got to nailing that hole, and it wasn't too bad. I'll try to zoom in here and see if you can see what it was. So that hole looked pretty good, and then on the other side, the other distant side, the hole was a little bit farther off, but you can still see it's not too bad, and given that this was the first try, I was pretty pleased with it. So with that set of preliminary holes in place, I went ahead and used the rest of the UJK system to drop down the 20 millimeter holes, plowing through 100 holes with the pins and the spacing and everything set up by those original pilot holes. One small crisis was sucking up the little UJK part, the pin, into the vacuum bag. But eventually, after digging around, I found it. And then finally, with all the holes in place, I went ahead and chamfered all of them, walking through and twisting my arm off. With everything done up on top, I was able to grab the router and run around and finally do the round over around all the edges. One last way to finish this up is I've got these little poplar wedges. I'm just going to glue these in the corners just to give a little bit more strength to these corners. Now that I've got it upside down, it's easy. I can clamp those and let them sit. Okay, so the module's all done. So now I can go ahead and bolt it in, or use the dogs actually to connect it to the sawhorses and give that a try. So the dogs are already in place. I don't know if you can see them. They're silver in the sawhorses. I just have them slid in from the backside in the sawhorses. And then I'm going to just set the little MFT table up on top there. And I've got a 2x6 that I'm going to stick a piece of all thread through and just kind of bolt it on there just so that I can suspend the MFT top from the board on a bridge while I'm locating those dogs and getting the dogs set up. So with that board bolted on, I can go ahead and use it to suspend the MFT table between the sawhorses. And then I need to just kind of, so fiddly a little bit, but I need to push the dogs in and locate them. So I've got a stick to back up the dog, and then I need to kind of reach through, and I've got these little quick knobs that I screw into the backside of the dog to essentially sandwich the two and use the dog to hold things together. All right, well, I'm really pleased with this new MFT module. The sawhorses in it integrate pretty well, and I'm gonna give myself about a B+ effort on getting these holes aligned as I'd hoped. If I use the UJK jig here and on this sawhorse, if I drop a pin in there, and then I go to my module, lines up pretty well. I got that distance between those two just right. Now, if in theory, if that's exactly right, then this one should be just right too. And it's close, but so the holes are racked a little bit, but they're the right distance apart. So it's very close. And I think I can definitely improve that with some new jig ideas and a little bit better processes, and certainly paying attention to where I need to do that. It's not as good on this side. This module, the sawhorse is a little bit too thick, so when I try the same thing over there, they don't line up as well. So there's going to be a consistency factor to that as well as I go from module to module. But anyway, that I think headed in the right direction, where I can get the modules that put together and end up into a nice kind of integrated grid, so that I can do long things with good accuracy. One thing I notice when I'm editing is I look back at the project I've done and through the eyes of an editor, and I notice some things that either went really well or went really poorly. And I want to call out two tools that really left an impression on me in this most recent build of this MFT top. The loser in the group was the drill bit that was provided with the pocket jig I got. The bit's just not very good. I don't even know if it may even be defective, but replacing it with a $12 Craig drill bit, that tool works great. So if you get one of those, just buyer beware, you may want to replace the bit, and that's going to probably help quite a bit. The clear winner in this was this is just a Rockler makes it. I think there's others that make them too. It's just a router dust collector, and I hooked that up to my fine vacuum cleaner, and it made just a massive difference. When I was cutting the big roundover for these sawhorses, it just blew a cloud of dust all over the place because there was no good way to dust collect. With that shroud on there, when I cut the same groove on the top of this thing, there was almost no dust, and it really kept it down. So clear winner, clear loser, I'll try to point those out as we go. I've got a whole Lego set of stuff here to start to learn about. I've got the micro jigs, I've got the grooves in here so I can clamp. I may add more grooves, and I need to learn where, and whether it's on the apron or on the side. Where do I reach for a spot to clamp something? So I'm going to use these modules for a while before I go ahead and build my final ones. And I want to try to learn as much as I can just in practice and see what I get. There's some clamps that fit down in the dog holes. There's little dogs that I can use to position things or to stand boards up so I can saw and not kerf things. Dogs for hold downs. TSO makes a dog that I got one of here to test. There'll be cases when I've got modules where I can't reach up behind to back it up if I'm trying to join two modules together. So they've got a joiner dog that can all do it from one side. It's got kind of a cammed little lobe that drops out, and it handles different thicknesses. So that's when I'll try, as I start to build more of these modules and little test pieces. I'm going to build my modules out of higher quality MDF than this. This MDF is just the most inexpensive stuff I can find. It's natural, it's disposable. I can build these tops fairly quickly now that I learned how to do it. But I really want to have one that looks super nice and that is a little bit better quality. So there's one called Valchromat, which is fairly expensive, but I figure you're putting so much effort into getting this right, and it's a long-term thing, that I'll probably invest in that. The place that sells Valchromat in the US is fairly near me. It's a day's drive, so I'll probably do a road trip video soon and run down and pick up stuff. And I'd love to get your input. I have seen a lot of these hooked on wood and a lot of other people using black MDF, and it looks nice, but I want to try something maybe a little bit different. And so my vote right now is to use this green for the tops and this dark gray for the drawer fronts and the other parts of it. I'd like to hear your thoughts. And it's kind of aesthetic, but it's also practical, because I know just this natural MDF picks up handprints and oil stains and marks super quickly. and gets dirty really quick. Some of these, if I start with a gray color or a colored thing, it'll hold up better. I've ordered some samples here, and so I can also try some holes in this and use these and see if one of these behaves better for my uses than the others. I got all these holes done. I don't know how many, couple hundred, 300 holes here. And the day I got them done, I received from UJK, I'd ordered, and it was back ordered, but I got the reamer and chamfer tool, so I can go through and clean up these holes if I find any that are sticky. That'll be nice to have for doing repetitive holes in big mass in the future. And then I've got these really nice UJK dogs that lock in and anchor and little rail clips, so I can start clipping down my saw rail, and I can do clear cuts. So I'm gonna do some projects on top of this. I'm gonna learn as I go. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the colors. And I wanna thank you for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, you wanna learn more about the workshop or see some of these new things, subscribe. One of the next ones I'm gonna do is a drawer stack with some of this colored MDF. And I've got an idea for the door fronts there that's a little bit different than what you might have seen. So please subscribe. Until I see you next, I'll be out building. Thanks for watching.